Have you ever sat across from a parent who's at their breaking point? They're frustrated, exhausted, and desperate for answers. As a BCBA, you know that every challenging behavior is more than just a problem to solve. It's a moment that can either build trust or deepen frustration. So let's pause for a second. Think about a family you're working with right now. What if you could give those parents the tools not just to manage meltdowns, but to transform them into opportunities for connection and growth? In this video, we'll explore how you can coach parents to respond to challenging behavior with compassion, empowering them to move beyond quick fixes and create lasting positive change for their children and their families. Now, you've probably heard the debate, is compassion effective or does it just reinforce problem behavior? Here's what the research actually shows. Dr. Greg Hanley and colleagues have demonstrated that compassionate, skill-based approaches like SBT and FCT can be both effective and practical for families. In fact, these approaches often involve initially reinforcing challenging behavior as part of the assessment and even as part of the teaching process. So by doing so, we can quickly identify the function of the behavior and teach children safer, more appropriate ways to communicate their needs. What's unique here is that when parents and practitioners respond to challenging behavior with understanding and reinforcement, rather than something strict like extinction, they can still achieve meaningful reductions in problem behavior and significant skill acquisition. They also create a much safer situation for families or for your RBTs. This approach not only reduces the intensity and frequency of challenging behavior, but it also builds trust and buy-in from families. So when you teach parents to respond compassionately, you're not teaching them to give in. You're following a research-based process that leads to lasting change, improved relationships, and better overall outcomes for children. Have you ever noticed that the biggest breakthroughs happen when a parent discovers the why behind their child's behavior on their own? So one of the most powerful shifts we can help parents make is to see challenging behavior not as defiance or manipulation, but as communication. As BCBAs, we know that every behavior serves a function. When you're coaching, guide parents to look for the why behind their child's behavior. Instead of asking, how do I stop this behavior? Encourage them to ask, what is my child trying to tell me right now? Sometimes the most powerful breakthroughs happen not when we tell parents what's going on, but when we help them discover it for themselves. So let me tell you a quick story. I once worked with a mother who was deeply concerned about her son's sudden outbursts. He could be perfectly content playing on his own in the living room, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, he'd start crying, screaming, and banging his head on the floor. Instead of jumping to conclusions, I asked her to walk me through what was happening before, during, and after these episodes. As we talked, I asked her questions like, where are you when this happens? And what are you doing right before he starts? As she reflected, she realized these incidents almost always happened when she was in the kitchen making dinner, separate from her son. Naturally, when he started banging his head, she would rush in to pick him up and keep him safe. In that moment, as she was telling me the story, she saw it. His behavior wasn't random or just a problem to stop. It was his way of communicating that he needed her attention and reassurance. By guiding her with the right questions, she was able to reframe her son's behavior as meaningful communication. This shift didn't just help her understand her child better, it empowered her to respond more effectively and compassionately. In your next session, try asking parents to describe the last time their child escalated. Help them identify the very first sign things were starting to go off track. That's where your intervention starts, with those precursor behaviors. Let's talk about the real world for a second. Parents are bombarded with conflicting advice about how to handle challenging behavior. One moment they're told to never give in or to set firm boundaries. The next, they're encouraged to be compassionate and comfort their child. In the heat of the moment, when a child is melting down and emotions are running high, this can leave parents feeling overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. As BCBAs, one of the most valuable things you can do is to validate these feelings and help parents sort through the noise. When a parent shares the confusion or frustration, acknowledge it. It makes sense that you're getting mixed messages. There's a lot of advice out there, and it's not always clear what's best for your child. From there, guide parents to the evidence and the functional approach. Remind them that our goal isn't just to stop behavior in the moment, but to understand what's driving it and to teach new, more effective skills. When you're coaching parents through those tough moments, encourage them to pause and take a breath before they respond. Invite them to ask themselves, what might my child need right now? Remind them that responding with compassion isn't about giving up on boundaries. It's about meeting the need first so real teaching can happen later. Have you ever written a perfect extinction plan only to watch it fall apart in the real world? Let's be honest, extinction is rarely as clean or effective in the real world as it is on paper. We all know the theory. If you withhold reinforcement for problem behavior, it should decrease. But in practice, especially with families, extinction is almost never implemented with 100% fidelity. Why? Because life happens. Parents are juggling siblings, dinner, work, and sometimes public settings where ignoring a meltdown it just isn't possible or even safe. When parents can't maintain extinction every single time, what actually happens is that the problem behavior is reinforced intermittently. And as we know from the science, intermittent reinforcement doesn't weaken behavior, it makes it stronger and more resistant to change. This is where many behavior plans fall apart. We set families up with extinction procedures, but when they can't follow through perfectly, we inadvertently create a schedule that escalates and entrenches the very behaviors we're trying to reduce. So, what's the alternative? Here's where it gets practical. Once we move beyond extinction and embrace a reinforcement-based approach, the next step is teaching parents how to respond compassionately and effectively in the moment. As BCBAs, our job is to break down these strategies into clear, actionable steps that families can use, even in the most challenging situations. Start by helping parents see that their first responsibility is always safety. If a behavior becomes dangerous, it's okay to step in, even if that means providing some form of reinforcement. Safety always comes before strict adherence to a plan. Next, encourage them to maintain trust and connection by responding to distress with calm, supportive language. When you see appropriate behaviors like asking for a break or using words, make sure those are reinforced quickly and generously. If problem behavior still happens, coach parents to respond with less valuable or delayed reinforcement rather than ignoring it completely. Here's an example. When you calm down, you can have the iPad for 1 minute. Instead of saying, if you ask, you can have it for 5 minutes. Once things are calm, that's the perfect time to teach and practice new skills. And finally, work with parents to identify all the ways reinforcement might be happening in their home. So you can design a plan that fits their real life, not just what's on paper. So let's pause and dig a little deeper into the science that makes these strategies work. It's called the matching law. The matching law tells us that people and children allocate their behavior in proportion to the rate, quality, and immediacy of reinforcement available for each option. In other words, behavior matches the value of the outcomes it produces. Behavior goes where reinforcement flows. In practice, this means that if a child can get their needs met faster, more reliably, or in a more enjoyable way by using a replacement behavior, they'll start to choose that behavior more often, even if the problem behavior still sometimes works. The key is to make the reinforcement for the desired behavior consistently better than what's available for the problem behavior. This is where concurrent schedules of reinforcement come in. Instead of trying to eliminate all reinforcement for problem behavior, a goal that's often unrealistic for families, we intentionally design the environment so that both behaviors can access reinforcement, but the replacement behavior is always the better deal. For example, a child who screams for attention might still get a brief response, but if they ask appropriately, they get a richer, more immediate, or longer lasting interaction with their parent. You might say to parents, we're not trying to make it impossible for your child to get what they want. We're making it easier and more rewarding for them to use the skills we're teaching. Or you might say something like, if asking for a break always works faster and better than having a meltdown, your child will start to choose that option more and more. If you want to learn more about how to use concurrent schedules of reinforcement in your practice, check out my video, How to Reduce Problem Behavior Without Extinction, The Power of Concurrent Schedules. It's a practical guide to designing effective, ethical interventions that work in the real world. Even with the best plans, challenging moments still happen. What matters most is how we help parents respond in those moments, both to keep everyone safe and to set the stage for future learning. Coach parents to use a two-step approach. De-escalate first, then teach. First, help parents stay calm and focused on safety above all else. Remind them that it's okay to provide comfort, remove triggers, or even give a break if it helps their child regain control. The goal isn't to teach in the heat of the moment. It's to help the child feel safe enough to calm down. You might suggest language like, let's move to a quieter space, or I see you're upset. I'm here to help. Encourage parents to use a calm tone, open body language, and minimal demands during escalation. This helps prevent the situation from getting worse and models emotional regulation for the child. Once the child is calm, that's the time to teach. Help parents practice new skills with their child, like asking for help, requesting a break, or using a visual support. Role play these scenarios and reinforce every attempt at appropriate communication. For example, next time you need a break, you can say, break, or show me the break card. Or if you want my attention, just tap me on the shoulder instead of yelling. Remind parents that teaching works best when everyone is calm and connected. By meeting the child's needs first, they create an environment where learning can actually happen. So let's bring this to life with a real-world example. I worked with the mother of a 12-year-old boy who engaged in extremely dangerous behaviors when he was escalated. He'd put holes in the walls with his head. He'd break the floors, the ceramic tile floors, by jumping. And he even aggressed towards his mother, who was a very small woman. One of the most challenging times was the transition from the van that brought him home from school. He would refuse to get out of the van unless his mother said very specific words. If she didn't, or if she tried to ignore his requests and push him to get out, he would escalate, sometimes to the point of serious property destruction or aggression. This mom had previously been told to ignore these requests, thinking that giving in would reinforce the problem behavior. But what actually happened was that she ignored the early low-level behaviors, his precursor behaviors, until he escalated to something that was truly dangerous. At that point, she felt she had no choice but to give in and keep him safe. And the result of that was that he learned that he needed to escalate to dangerous behaviors in order to get his needs met, and began escalating faster and earlier in the chain. When we started working together, we took a different approach. Instead of waiting for things to get out of control, we focused on reinforcing those early precursor behaviors as communication. We recognized that what he was really seeking was consistency and predictability in the transition. Even though mom didn't always know exactly what words he wanted her to say, we helped him learn to communicate his needs more effectively, sometimes by prompting him to tell her, sometimes by using visual supports. By reinforcing his early communication and requests, Mom was able to prevent escalation and keep everyone safe. She felt more confident and in control, and her son learned that he didn't have to resort to dangerous behaviors to get his needs met. Think about a family you're working with right now. How could this approach change their story? When we help parents shift from crisis management to proactive, compassionate strategies, the impact goes far beyond reducing problem behavior in the moment. We're building lasting change, both for the child and for the parent. As parents, learning to recognize and reinforce early communication signals builds confidence. They move from feeling helpless or reactive to feeling empowered and prepared. Each successful transition, each moment of de-escalation, and each new skill their child learns is a win worth celebrating. As BCBAs, it's important to acknowledge these victories and reinforce the parents' efforts, just as we do with our learners. For children, these approaches foster resilience. They learn that their needs can be met safely and predictably without having to escalate to dangerous or disruptive behaviors. Over time, they develop more effective communication, greater self-regulation, and stronger sense of trust in their caregivers. This is the heart of our work. It's not just managing behaviors, but building those skills, relationships, and confidence that last. By focusing on compassionate, reinforcement-based strategies, we help families move from surviving to thriving, creating a foundation for lifelong learning and connection. If you found this helpful, watch the next video in the series where we'll dive into the most important topics for both parents and children, and that's emotional regulation. We'll explore how to teach parents simple, effective regulation strategies for themselves and for their child, and how to coach these skills even when parents are feeling overwhelmed. You'll also learn how to make emotional regulation a core part of your ABA coaching, not just an add-on or a side lesson. To make your work even more impactful, the Achieve Parent Training System gives you access to a library of parent-facing videos that explain these foundational concepts in clear, accessible language. This means you don't have to spend your valuable session time teaching the basics. Instead, you can focus on what matters most, coaching parents on how to apply these ideas in their daily lives, troubleshooting real-world challenges, and celebrating progress together. With these resources, you'll be equipped to help families build skills, confidence, and resilience they need, not just to manage challenging behavior, but to thrive together. Stay tuned for the next video and explore the Achieve Parent Training System to take your parent coaching to the next level.